Hello, everyone. Welcome to News Now, the Belmont Journal's daily update on what's going on in the community of Belmont. I'm your host, Roger Colton. I have with me today Franklin Tucker, who is the editor and publisher of the Belmontonian, Belmont's online source for hyperlocal news. Franklin, thanks for joining us. Let's bring folks up to date on what's going on with COVID-19 in the school system.
Well, as it seems like as the world turns, Belmont is still staying the course. What we're seeing is that more and more school systems are opening up for in-person learning, whether it's just for the elementary schools like Boston is doing. And we're also seeing guidelines for reopening schools, bringing kids back into in-person learning. The CDC came out with its guidelines, and so did the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and which they said within 2 weeks they're going to have its roadmap, which they are going to truly push for in-class learning. Right now in Belmont, we have a hybrid for all for the elementary and the middle school and the high school. And but there is a great push among residents and parents to go full time and to follow basically what the science says. And what I got a response from Superintendent Phelan, and he said that the updated guidance from the CDC will provide some flexibility and more in-person learning. So that's something that we should look forward to. And maybe that will go towards the elementary schools because they feel that is the easiest and where the least likely you will get COVID infection transmission. But again, in Belmont, that's a little bit, that will be hard to do because most of those schools, with the exception of the Wellington, are older schools with not a lot of space. These are just, very tight to begin with. And trying to put an entire school into, let's say, the Butler school, is just going to be too hard because if you're going to have to put 6 feet between each student, you're just going to get 60% of the kids to get in there in the first place. Now, if you can.
And there are other constraints, right? There are stakeholders that need to be consulted. The teachers union needs to be consulted.
As part of their agreement, as part of their contract, whenever there are changes that are done for scheduling or anything in terms of teachers, how they teach, that has to be negotiated. Each one, it's not something that the superintendent or the school committee can demand teachers to do. It has to go through the middleman of the Belmont Education Association. Some people see that as an impediment towards a quick movement towards a full-time in-school learning. But that's part of the contract. I know that some of the animosity that we're seeing towards the Belmont educators by parents is just that. They feel that they're slow walking any kind of improvement, any kind of movement towards full-time learning. Now we haven't heard much from the Belmont educators. They've been very quiet, or very disciplined, I would say, in terms of what they believe and what their views are. They're taking it basically piecemeal. When somebody's coming with some suggestion or some move towards another way of doing things, they're going to negotiate. They're going to be very serious about it and negotiate it. This is not something where they're just going to pop off or not listen to the people who they represent. So right now, so that's where we are in terms of the internal of Belmont. So we're seeing a lot more movement towards opening schools, it might be a little slower in Belmont because we do have this contract that has to be met.
One thing I think people are asking is who makes the final decision? Is it Superintendent Phelan's decision? Is it the school committee's decision? Or can the state direct Belmont to open its schools?
Well, the state can direct Belmont to open the schools simply by saying that they will no longer take, let's say the state says in 2 weeks in their guidelines, we're not going to take hybrid, we're not going to look at hybrid hours as full-time hours. Well, then the town is going to have to find some way of moving to an acceptable hours for what the state sees. So we don't know exactly. So that's why a lot of people are just waiting until the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, known as DESE, comes out with their approval. So everything is moving in the directions towards in-school learning, but how fast that's going to take, and if and how that can be done in Belmont is still up in the air. I think there's going to be a lot more understanding and a lot more direction when the state comes out with their plan.
One thing that when you say that Belmont is moving toward in-person learning, the calendar tells us that it's almost March.
That's right.
At what point does the calendar run out on this decision? And the school year is over or so close to being over that that the decision just doesn't make sense for this year.
Well, when you talk to parents, they believe that any time is good. Even if it's in April, they just want to put people. They just want to have their children in class, both for just the normality of it, but also for what they have been really promoting and that is the mental health issue in terms of students being out. We've seen a lot of reports, especially in the last 2 months, which have stated that prolonged absence of schooling really affects not only the education that they receive, but also the social emotional aspect of school. They miss their friends. They feel isolated, and at a young age like this, that's something that can really come back and be a long-term problem. And so, parents are saying, if it turns out this week, next week, April, do it. Now that does come to, so there is an issue though, like you said, when is it too late? When do we get to that point where it's we basically have a fail date, some certain day where we can't do it because simply opening up the school will be too late, and we're just not going to have anything to do. Is it halfway through the semester? Is it a quarter till the end of the semester? I think that will be worked on by the educators. It will be them who make that decision. I know that Mr. Phelan had stated that that it looked like maybe it's a little late to open up the schools, but it's just the pressure now. Everybody is pressuring the schools to open, whether it's the federal government or the state government or local parents. They just may have to open it, even if it is at the detriment to education itself.
And one final question: when can parents expect a decision, or is that not sayable at this point?
Well, right now, Belmont has a return to learning working group. That's like a 27-member group, which is taking every aspect of this, and they're going to make recommendations to the superintendent and to the school committee. Mr. Phelan has said that the current hybrid plan that Belmont is in is within the CDC updated guideline. And also, he also, and I think we can't underestimate the feeling of the union in terms of vaccination. They would like to see the teachers get vaccinated. I think when just talking to the teachers union, they have made it pretty clear that if they can get vaccinated, like let's say the state just says, okay, next week, only teachers get vaccinated, and they all get vaccinated. I think that goes a long way to getting kids and teachers back into the classroom. It all comes down from the BEA's standpoint that it's all about safety. It's not about if they're slow walking it and they disagree with that. They're just saying they're being careful. They don't want to see especially with the COVID virus variants, which are coming from which have getting people sicker and sicker, and they don't want their teachers to be in a situation where you could have 6 or 7 teachers get sick all at once, and how is that going to help bringing kids into the classroom?
Okay, let's close the door on the schools, so to speak, and let's talk about some news that comes out of Cushing Square with the new development in Cushing Square.
I don't think you can call it a new development
The Bradford.
anymore.
Okay, let's talk about the Bradford.
The Bradford. Of course, it's Toll Brothers Apartments. About 120 apartments that are now being occupied at a very expensive rate. The minimum rate for an apartment in that complex is nearly $4,000, and a very small apartment to boot. But people are moving in. They have yet to get the occupancy license, but they're allowing people to move in. There's also the issues of commercial space there that has yet to be. The only thing that's open is Starbucks, as you know, and the only reason that is because they had an agreement already. When they knocked down the old Starbucks, that they would be the first one in. There was a meeting this week concerning the environmental issues with or I should just say the environment of the complex. There was, of course, some fumes that were coming up and being on the top floors, and they found out what that was, and they plugged it in. But they basically, what they're finding is that even though the site was had a number of former tenants who caused a lot of pollution. There was a dry cleaner there for a long time, and there were other issues with that. They've pretty much mitigated the fumes and everything that had been in the soil. So, and also the water, the air. It looks like they have done a pretty good job, and it doesn't appear that environmental hazards will prevent that from opening soon.
That's great. Thanks for bringing us up to date. We've been speaking with Franklin Tucker, the editor and publisher of the Belmontonian, Belmont's online source for hyperlocal news. You've been watching News Now, the Belmont Journal's daily update on what's going on in the community of Belmont. Thanks for watching. I'm your host, Roger Colton. I'll talk with you again next time.